to come have this discussion. So, what were your hopes for this discussion? What were some of the things you were thinking about when you decided that this might be something you want to spend some time doing on a Saturday morning? What were you hoping to get? Yes.
Well, I happen to be teaching a multicultural class today, and a perfect tie-in with our class.
Okay, so it's a perfect tie-in with your curriculum and what you're teaching in the class. All right, cool. Other folks? Hopes? Things you thought you might get, things you want to get?
A free sandwich.
A free sandwich? All right, that's always good. Honesty is always appreciated. What else?
Mentoring inner city kids.
Okay.
Reaching out to the families and just needing to know more boundaries. So I don't get burned out, but yet wanting to be there and being influence.
Okay. So working with inner city families, learning boundaries, wanting to be a good influence. Okay. Cool. Where are we today? Where are we today?
Physically or?
We're at Adler.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. I mean, it wasn't a trick question, you know. I added some ambiguity to the question, so you have to think a little bit.
Right.
But it's real obvious that we're at Adler Graduate School, which also means what in terms of my presentation? What can you expect?
It's a psychological approach to some sort of social.
Not just a psychological approach, but a Adlerian approach, right? So I want you to look for those themes as we have this conversation today. All right, cool. So I believe, and someone said, "Oh, I want a cool poster like that," or "I want my face on my PowerPoint like that." You too can make yourself famous, right? So you'll see some other stuff. It's not a whatever. So first of all, we need to ask ourselves, when people come to us for help and for assistance, we need to ask the core question, what is it that they want? What are they looking for from us? And typically, what would we say as Adlerians? What is it that people want?
Social community.
Social community. Belonging. Security. And with that social belonging, I would say what? It's a sign of the times. Significant. Okay, good. Significance, right? So people want significance, belonging, and safety. That is why they are coming to us. There is some deficit that they have in their lives in regards to either significance, belonging, or safety. So let's back up and talk a little bit about the truths about human beings. First, human beings can learn, change, and grow, right? So who I am today is a result of everything that I've learned, that I processed. However, that does not determine what I can be in the future. What determines what I can and will do in the future? Choices when? Now, right? So in the past, if I was a particular kind of way, I can augment that by changing my behavior when? Now, right? So if I change my behavior now, that starts a whole new chapter of who I will be in the future. I don't have to be like my father, right? I don't have to be like my neighborhood. I don't have to be like my socioeconomic or cultural group if that doesn't lead me to another thing. So we'll talk about that in just a second as well. People do what they think works even when what? It doesn't work. But they do it because they think that it works. Our understanding of why they do something is not a prerequisite for them doing it. We don't have to understand why people do what they do for them to carry that out. It doesn't have to be logical to us. It doesn't have to make sense to us. But in some way, it makes sense to them, even if it's ineffective. All right? All human behavior is goal-directed. Everyone does something because they feel, think, or experience some kind of benefit, even if it is a negative benefit. So if they have a negative self-image and they do something negative and they get negative consequences, that re-stimulates what they believe about themselves. So they get a reward. Does that make sense? Okay. And lastly, that attitude is a reaction to a goal. Typically, what do we think about or what do we talk about in terms of an attitude? What is an attitude? Anyone been accused of having an attitude? So what's an attitude? It's a behavior. Okay, what else? It's a response to something. Okay.
Maybe emotions.
It may be emotional. Emotions? Yes, sir.
It's a filter.
It's a filter. All right. When people were telling you that you had attitude, what were they talking about?
The way you
The way
approach
you
things.
carry yourself.
The way you approach things, the way you carry yourself. All right. And I would say that those are all great answers. But for me, those particular answers were a little bit inadequate for the challenges that I was facing. So my parents would say stuff to me like, boy, fix your attitude. Or they would say, boy, fix your face. Right? And so I'm like, making all sorts of faces, which ultimately sent me to my room because that's not what they were talking about, right? Or they would say, go to your room till you learn how to act. And so I'd go to my room, I'd hang out for a while, and then I'd step out into the hallway. To be or not to be? And I spent more time in my room, right? But that wasn't what they were talking about. And so this whole concept of attitude really had me confused until I figured it out. So Friday night. So first of all, my dad was my pastor. So growing up, we went to church on a regular, right? And on Sunday, we would go to, and because he was the pastor, we opened up church and we also closed church. So we'd open church on Sunday at 7:30 a.m. We'd close the church at 11:30 p.m. We stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we're black, but because chicken is delicious. All right? So I know church all day on Sunday. So Friday night, I asked my dad for the car, and what does my dad say because he loves me?
No.
He says, yes, he loves me, right? So I get the keys, I'm hanging out with my friends, we kick it, we cruise, I fill the car up, I come home before curfew, and my dad says I have what kind of an attitude?
Good attitude.
I have a good attitude or a positive attitude. What do I say about my dad's attitude? He also has a good attitude, right? So Sunday rolls along, my best friend Dexter calls me at noon. Says, Andre, can you pick me up for the movies? What do I know about Sundays? I'm at church all day. But I'm 17, I'm invulnerable, and Jesus is my friend, right? So I go up to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And what does he say?
No.
He says, no. He also gives me a lecture about how I'm leading people to hell. Right? The ultimate consequence of any behavior in my household was that you were going to hell. You didn't do the dishes, you're going to hell. You didn't make up your bed, you're going to hell. And either you could go to hell on your own or they would show you the way. So now I say my dad has what kind of an attitude? A bad attitude. And consequently, what does he say about my attitude? That I also have a bad attitude. So what is it that actually determines the attitude that one has? Perception?
Feelings.
Feelings? Atmosphere? I thought I heard it. Starts with G and ends in O. Your goal. When you accomplish your goal, you have a good attitude. When you are denied or limited access to your goal, you have a bad or negative attitude, right? Think about a teenager in your life. Think about when you were a teenager. When you were denied access to a goal, that's when the would erupt out of your spirit, right? But then when you receive something that you like, you want it to, almost be in the same room with your parent. You may even want to touch them and maybe speak to them face to face, right? So an attitude becomes extremely important. One of the things that starts to happen for helpers is that we take the signs of attitude, we don't recognize them for what they are. Attitudes direct us towards goal accomplishment or the lack of accomplishment. But as human beings, what we typically take attitude as a personal attack or interaction between the two of us. Who does she think she is? She can't talk to me like that. Change your attitude. Do this, do that. All of a sudden, we get caught up in what I call the gorilla dance. The gorilla dance is simply this. So there's a rule in nature. First of all, there's no hospitals out in nature, right? So one of the first rules of nature is that smaller animals do not attack larger animals. I mean, for all things considered, right? So you get a pack of wolves who then become larger than the moose, but one wolf typically does not attack a moose on his own, right? So there's a rule of nature. And why is that rule of nature in place?
Self-preservation.
Self-preservation. So explain that. I mean, you just took a bite, sorry. Somebody else help her with that. So what does she mean by self-preservation? How does that rule help in self-preservation? That smaller animals do not attack larger animals.
Smaller animals gonna get hurt.
The smaller animal may get hurt, right? So gorillas understand this. And so one of the things I saw on one of these on Discovery Channel, right, was that there was a gorilla who was protecting his territory. So he's doing his gorilla thing and eating leaves and doing all the things that gorillas do. And then all of a sudden another gorilla comes into his territory or is on the border of his territory. So he goes up to the gorilla and he starts grabbing grass, right? He's throwing the grass up in the air and the other gorilla's doing the same thing. He's like, okay, right? And so then he starts showing his teeth and he's like, ah, and he's throwing up grass, and he's like, ah, and then the other gorilla's doing the same thing. And then the other gorilla's throwing up grass and they're both throwing up grass and showing their teeth and the one decides to beat his chest. Ah, and he's like, ah, ah, ah. Now these are 500-pound creatures. What's the last thing that a 500-pound creature wants to do with another 500-pound creature? Fight. Why?
Who knows who's going to get hurt?
Somebody's going to get hurt. And to get hurt means what out in nature? You're dead. Because there are no hospitals. And so oftentimes when people kick out attitude, what they're saying is, A, I can't get to my goal and I want to defend myself from being hurt. And so they make all this boisterous stuff. And as helpers, sometimes we get confused with that stuff and we don't look for the goal. We get caught up in the gorilla dance. Right? So as helpers, we need to be clear about that in our own self. And when we are focused on our goals, when we move towards our goals, Stephen Covey talks about being proactive. And I would like to say, when we're moving away from our goals, we're being reactive. So what is it that should be driving all the decisions that we help people make? Goals. Goals. Now, here's the trick. As practitioners, we are professional. We have the research, we have the schooling, we have the knowledge. So we know what people's goals should be. But what people's goals should be and what people want their goals to be may not necessarily be the same thing. All right? So we're going to talk about those, how those become quote-unquote sins, if you will. Does this make sense so far? All right, cool. I know some of you have heard parts of this before, but I am the same person, so I'm going to keep doing some of the same things.